My name is Ashley DeBlasi. I'm your Assistant Director of Professional Development with IIMC, and I'll be helping to facilitate part 2 of this meeting. Part 1 was fantastic. I know for me personally, I really enjoyed the conversation. I loved the idea sharing, the collaboration that came out of it. So thank you to those that were involved in that part 1. Thank you to those that watched that replay. That way we're all on the same page as we move forward today. Since we last met, the world has kind of done a pivot. So we've done another 180. Not only are we dealing with COVID, but now there's so many other issues that are being piled onto it. So I thought instead of doing actual introductions, that what we could start with is on a note of positivity and coming from a place of gratitude. So sounds a little hokey, but if everybody would bear with me and just participate, I would love for you to drop in the chat box just one thing that you are grateful for today. And for me, I am incredibly grateful that each of you guys are so passionate about what you do, that you continue to show up and have the tough conversations with me and with IIMC and each other. So drop it in the chat box real quick. Doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be big. It can be something as simple as I'm grateful for the air in my lungs, the sun in the sky, the color of the flowers in my yard. Doesn't have to be fancy, but go ahead and drop that in there. I see a lot of health in there, family. Excuse me. Now, as we're doing this, I feel it's really important to come into this meeting in a place of being open-minded, being respectful, and from that place of gratitude. We are all so fortunate to be able to serve the people that we do, work in the capacity that we do, and have each other to rely on as resources. So I hope as we continue the conversation today that we carry it in with that spirit, with that mindset, as opposed to any other versions of people that we're seeing in the world today. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for showing up with that open mindset and that open heart. And thank you for being willing to share all of the gratitude that we see in the chat box. I love it. All right. So while we're wrapping that up, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. We'll just look at, we'll pop up the housekeeping. Just one more time, go over those. I know we did this before, but we'll take a peek at the housekeeping. Give me 1 second to get it up. Okay. And just as a reminder, and for those that weren't able to join us before, go ahead and mute your microphones if you haven't muted your microphone already, and make sure any other electronic devices are turned off. Any kind of background noise, email alerts, anything you have going on your computer will also come through to everybody else's audio. So just out of respect for one another, especially for those that are going to be speaking, go ahead and mute your microphone and any other devices. If you have questions throughout the program, I'm going to give you a lot of opportunities to speak, and then if we want to break out into groups today, we can break out. I don't have it as structured as we did the last time because I really want to make this, what do you need based on what we did the last time? What do you guys want? So as we go through, we will be utilizing that raise your hand feature. So under the more option next to your name in the participants list, you will see that raise your hand. It'll pop up a little blue hand next to your name, and either myself or Karen will be monitoring in that chat. And we'll be able to take a look and call upon you. So when we call upon you, we will either unmute you, or if we're unable to, we'll ask you to unmute and speak. Chat box can send direct messages, again, for tech issues to Karen directly. She'll help work you through those, or you can just drop any questions. As we're talking about a topic, if you don't want to raise your hand or unmute yourself, you are welcome to go ahead and just drop it in that chat, and we'll pause periodically to make sure that that content and those questions are being covered. If and when we break you up into small groups, if that's something you guys want to participate in today, those same rules will apply. I know when we're in smaller groups, it's not as important to mute your microphones. So the choice will be up to yours or your group in there. But I do encourage you guys to just be respectful of one another's sounds, environments, dogs barking, etc. All right. Are there any questions before we get going today? No? All right, everybody looks good. And if you haven't taken a look through the chat, if you're looking for some positivity in your life right now, there's a lot in there. So again, for those of you that we haven't renamed, I gave you the option in the beginning just to see where everybody is from in the world and kind of get an idea. You are welcome to rename yourself using your first and last name if you want to, and then what university you're with, what state you're with, what country you're with. So to do that, you just hover over the More option again under the participant next to your name, and you'll see rename. So I know some of you don't have it, and that's completely okay, but as we go through, if you want to identify where you're from, go for it. And then we'll go ahead and get started. So where we ended last time, we talked a lot about online learning. We talked a lot about where are you at and where is your institute at in this time. So what I'd like to do is pop back into there and kind of pick up from there. Let me pull up my screen one more time and get me over to another slide. Now, California was kind enough, Pamela Miller and Colleen Nickel were kind enough to provide us with a graphic before that really resonated with a lot of people. We got a lot of requests following the meeting for that graphic. So I thought what we would do is go through and start from here. So let me share my screen with you and we'll take a peek, and we're going to do a poll just to kind of gauge where everyone is at. So last time we met, we looked at this graphic, and if you weren't with us, hopefully you watched the replay and saw kind of the translation. So in terms of this blue circle, the tiny one, the darkest color, who do I want to be during COVID-19? We really looked at it from who do I want to be as institute director? Where do I fall? How does my institute fall on this scale? And we talked about the feedback that we got during part 1 registration, where we asked, what are you struggling with? What are your hurdles? Have you taken your programs online? And it was very clear that there were a couple different zones that our institute directors and associations were falling into. So we really looked at those that hadn't really done anything and were kind of frozen. Without judgment, we looked at who these individuals were and how do we help them move forward. We had quite a few of us in that learning zone where we're tiptoeing into online learning, we're tiptoeing into other learning methods that we can use to deliver education to our clerks. And then there was a handful of us, a very small group, into that growth zone that were just moving forward. Online learning was not a big deal. We were figuring it out. We were moving forward. So I want to take a moment and just check in today. Again, the world has completely shifted in the last 2 weeks. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll where I want you to tell us, what zone did you find yourself in when we met 2 weeks ago? And if you weren't on the call 2 weeks ago, how would you have ranked yourself? So I'm going to launch a poll. Just give us some real-time feedback kind of where everybody was at before we see where we're going. So a poll screen should pop up on your screen. For those of you that are just calling in, you won't have this option, but if you want to unmute yourself and say so, you're welcome to do so. But let's just give us a little bit of feedback on where everybody is. And we'll go just about 30 seconds. So I see a lot of learning zone, and I see a lot of growth zone. I don't see anybody in the fear zone, which is good. Some of the responses that we got before could have been very construed as fear zone. And it may just be that those individuals aren't joining us today, or now that we're looking back, we're just reassessing where we were, realizing that we're not in that fear zone, that we were actually here, just still learning. So I'm going to share these results. Just take a peek. So we're right about 50-50 learning zone and growth zone, which is exactly where we want to be. We want to be in that progression moving forward. So I'm going to start a second poll now, and we're going to take a look at, you may need to X out of the poll box on your screen if it's still there, but I'm going to launch where we're at now. So I want you to tell us, where do you find yourself today? You may have regressed just based on scenarios that have happened in the world, or you may be moving forward, or we may just be staying in that same spot. But this will help us tailor the conversation today, knowing where everyone's at and where we want to go. This is interesting. We'll go about 5 more seconds and we'll close it out. So if you haven't voted, cast your vote. All right, here we go. So take a look at the results. We went from 5644 to 2179, with most of us being in that growth zone. That is realistically what we were hoping to see today. This is where we want to see IIMC collaboratively, meaning institute directors, associations, everybody moving forward. It took us some time to pivot and adapt, but here we are, and this is really, really good feedback that shows us where we're at. So let's go with that knowledge in mind. Does anybody want to share? I would love to hear from you individually, either in the chat, or you're welcome to raise your hand and we'll call on you. Has anything changed for you in the last 2 weeks? Have you taken any dramatic steps? Have you made any big changes that you'd like to share with the group that you feel everyone would benefit from? Ellen, I see your hand is up. Go ahead and unmute. And mute yourself. Audio.
Sorry.
There you go.
I think I move between being there, learning, and moving forward and growing. It depends on the situation that I'm confronted with. I know that right now, things that I did not think I would be angry about make me very angry. And so I have to do a lot of self-reflection on where I am coming from, and I have to check in with the people who can help me work through some of the questions. So I call them my safe zone, and that's where I learn, and then I can move into that growth, that comfortability of then being able to take it forward. So I fluctuate. I found it really hard that I had to say I was in one set or the other. So I'm fluid.
I completely understand that. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, it's not, and I see a couple more that are agreeing in the chat too. There's no one size fits all. There's no one box you're going to fit into. We're not trying to put labels on this at all. As we go through our day, things are going to shift. We're going to go fluid back and forth, and situations may change this. Absolutely. Is there anybody else that wants to share? I hear a voice. Go ahead. I heard a voice. Okay. Oh, Linda, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I think part of maybe what Ellen's saying, because there's some similarities, I think, in what a lot of us deal with, is when you are looking to help others and move forward, we have to kind of wait to see exactly where they want to go. So we may want to continue to move forward. Oh my gosh, how can I help them? How can they earn the points? But there are so many different pieces of the information from everyone to see that whole picture. So we may be here and already moving forward with those thought processes, but we have to wait for the input to make those decisions. And moving forward with the alternative learning environment with the virtual institute I felt one way. Hey, I feel I need to offer, the Arizona clerks an opportunity to earn education points in any way possible. So that was one step. The other piece is they really want an in-classroom environment, because that is how they connect and have that give and take versus a completely online. So I had to wait and say, okay, I want to go. I can't right now, because the group I'm training and educating to earn those points may have a different way that they want to get out of their office, see other people, whether it's once a year or twice a year at a conference. So I think, Ellen, what you're saying, you're moving forward, you're maybe in the learning and you're in that growth already, and you're always looking for alternatives, but you have to stop. I had to put brakes on. I can't keep going out of, I'm not doing my job as an ID. That was my fear. I'm not doing my job to give my clerks opportunities. But the growth potential was there. I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. And it actually sparks another thought for me. Does anybody want to weigh in? Has anybody experienced it? And maybe not. Have you been in one of those zones like Linda where you're go, 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 and you found that not even just the people you have to answer to, but your clerks may not have been? Has anybody had any direct experience with that, to where you're ready to do whatever it is that needs to be done, but your clerks, the people you serve, aren't ready? Is there anybody that wants to chime in? You're welcome to just unmute or raise your hand. I know Jason, yeah, go ahead.
I just added it to the chat box because as soon as you guys approved the Athenian Dialogue online, I contacted the instructor, sent out a survey to the 20 that we had registered for the event that was canceled. Only 6 were willing to do it online. So we're back to square one with that. So it's kind of how it goes, I guess.
Yep, no, absolutely. We're dealing with so many different types of individuals, learning styles, that it is definitely hard. Maureen, please unmute yourself. Let us hear from you.
Okay. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I have found that as I'm reaching out and hearing from clerks, some of it is not what I expected. They're asking, when are we going to have the Land Institute? So going on the assumption that everybody wanted everything virtual, I'm kind of impressed with how many folks have said, well, I'm budgeting for next year. I want to know if you're going to do it. So I think sometimes we get so enamored with, a progression that we assume everybody's bought into, and we forget to ask why people are coming. And I have been surprised at how many of my folks are basically saying, let me know when the dates are firm. I'm trying to do a combination, but I'm thinking we need to be cautious about just reinventing things without checking in with all these individuals whose needs we meet in more than one way. It's not just about the points for content. It's all the other unintended results that they expect. And that's why they go to conferences. So I've been surprised at how many folks are not assuming everything's going to be online. It surprised me because I was assuming that everybody thought everything this year was going to have to all be virtual.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing, Maureen. It kind of goes along hand in hand with what Cassie was talking about during the last meeting, and what she had done too, where we're looking for the face-to-face still. That's never going to go away. And right now, online is the option, simply because that's what we've been forced into. But what Cassie had done was implement the breakfasts, the lunches, sit and have a virtual lunch together. So you can still find stuff like that and ways to incorporate it. It's still virtual, it's still online, but it is the other parts of the conferences. It is the passing each other in the hallways. It is the connecting at lunches, at dinners that the clerks are coming for. So just make sure we keep that in mind as we go through what we're doing in the rest of 2020. How can we continue to make connections? So Camilla, I know your hand is up. Go ahead and share, unmute.
Unmute. Sorry, I had to learn where my unmute was.
Fair.
Listen, just wanted to share with the institutes themselves. We just got off of a phone call with the Region 3 presidents, state association presidents, and wanted an opportunity just to hear what was going on in their states. And we hear a diversity there of some that are conducting board meetings by Zoom or by WebEx means, virtual meetings. We have some that are not. So I see that we have sort of what we call a Duke's mixtures of responses from the different states in Region 3. And so I think one of the keys here is that to not assume, as Maureen was stating, that people assume we're going to do all virtual, but to work through each opportunity with them so that we're not scaring off the ones that don't know what to do or how to handle it. And I know I'm just being real with them too. I am not an expert in handling all this, but I'm willing to take it on and to let them know we're all human and mistakes are going to happen, but that's going to be part of the fun. When we started the discussion with the Athenians as a board, I had a lot of concerns. And since then, I've had more opportunities to work on Zoom, to work on different medias that are available. And it's a, trial and error situation, and it's not a negative thing. I mean, we're all growing through the process. So that's what I would encourage, is not to scare anyone off so that they think that it is all going to be virtual, because we all want the ability to see one another in person, but it just can't happen right now. But if we encourage them, let them know it's a learning process for all of us, so that we can grow them and bring them along with us instead of them feeling like they're left behind.
Thank you, Camilla. Yeah, I have a message in the chat that says that the lack of connection has shown how important human contact is. And I think that's all of us as program coordinators, directors, whatever box you want to put our collaborative group here into. It is hugely important that we still maintain that human connection. And we realize now what it is that we miss, what it is that makes the Institute so special, what it is that makes all of the regional conferences, IIMC conference special. It is the education, but it's also that human connection contact factor. So thank you for sharing that thought. Is there anybody else that wants to share anything that's going on in your institute, any changes that you've put in the last 2 weeks, just any thoughts you've had bouncing around in your head that you feel the group would benefit from? I see hand go up. Kitty Kapicki, please talk to us.
Yep, I was hoping Peggy was going to join us, but I haven't seen her pop in yet. I emailed her separately. I think she might have gotten her time zone messed up a little bit. We confirmed that we have to cancel our October Institute and Academy, because we normally have 200, 225, and there's no way our state's going to open up to that. We're still in a phase 3. Right now we're 10 or less together. We're hoping that we might get to phase 4 by the end of this month, but there's no way we're getting to phase 5 where it opens up for conferences. So the hotel let us out. We were very happy. We're actually moving to a different city for 2021. We haven't quite gotten our head wrapped around how we're going to do virtual yet. We had a very preliminary discussion with our training committee to even broach how we might do, especially our first year clerks, what we call nuts and bolts. And we think we might be able to break it into 4 2-hour sessions, but still going to work to figure out how we're going to put that together and do it on a Zoom call or whatever. Okay. So yeah, that was our disappointment for the week.
Well, it's interesting. Thank you for sharing, Kitty, because last time we had talked about the fall programs, summer and fall, were the ones that kind of fell into that danger zone when we were looking at that red, yellow, green scale, the ones that were kind of out of the woods for now. And now we're starting to creep into not so much the summer programs in jeopardy, but now those fall programs are in jeopardy. So I have a feeling that across the globe, we're going to see that same trend. So if anything in Illinois is an indication of what's happening, we're definitely heading in a different direction. Executive Director Chris Shelby, he has his hand up. Go ahead and weigh in, Chris.
Thanks, Ashley. Thank you. Some great comments. I just kind of want to follow up on somewhat what Camilla, our Region 3 Director, said, and Maureen from Institute Director out here in Region 9. I kind of agree with both your comments, especially you, Maureen, because I've heard and I've received a boatload of emails from members who missed going to our conference this year and our sponsors and vendors. And in talking to other association executive directors, they're trying to do these virtual conferences or virtual exhibit halls. And to a slight extent, the novelty is exciting, but then it tends to kind of not be what they want. And as Ashley mentioned, just the mere presence of networking, seeing somebody in the hallway, sitting down next to someone, having that face-to-face. I really, as great as technology is, I think it's just a support to what we were doing prior to all these things hitting. And so I just kind of want to say that that's a very good point. And if you're hearing it from your members and constituents, Maureen, I'm hearing it from everybody throughout the country, not to mention internationally as well, that they really miss that this kind of meeting is great for an hour, maybe 2 at the very most, but it doesn't replace the face-to-face. And then speaking for me personally, not only did I miss the conference and meeting people, but we have 7 or 8 new board members every year. And for me not to be able to meet them personally although I do know some of them, if not most. That's a big disadvantage for me and staff because we just don't know them, and you can't pick up on people in these kinds of conversations in terms of what they agree with, what they don't agree with. So I just want to just kind of, I'm glad Maureen brought that up. I'm with that. I'm glad what Camilla said, that it's kind of a little bit of a hybrid. And my 2 cents, that was it, Ashley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I know, Trey, I got you next, but I do have a question in the chat box from Amy in Florida. And in there, just to give you guys an idea, we're talking about online learning and an update on the Virtual Institute. The Virtual Institute did start on Wednesday. We had New England offer their first session, opened the registration up last Thursday, and it sold out in 75 minutes. We had 100 spots. But I mean, they flew out the door. My inbox was full with hundreds of people that were asking, are you going to do it again? When's the next session going to open up? Can you add more seats? People begging. So the education department, and Kelly, if you want to weigh in after we let Trey speak as well, from an education department perspective, we have people that want both. And we've always realized as a department, we need to cater to all the different styles, all of the different types of people, all the different generations that we're serving. So the Virtual Institute released session number 2 yesterday. It sold out in 36 minutes. So the demand is there, and there's varying reasons. It could be the panic of not being able to get back to a face-to-face institute, the panic of not knowing if your institute is going to go online, or it can be just that desire, that burning nature that we have to finish that certification, to continue our education, whatever it may be. So we do have to definitely think about the in-person for those that want it, but we do need to continue to make opportunities available, knowing that we have no idea where we're going to go, how we're going to get there, and when we're going to be able to go back to whatever normal looks like now. Trey, why don't you weigh in for us and let us hear what you have to say.
Hi, there are 5 children here, if you don't count me as a child, so it's possible that you'll hear some kind of unsettling noise. But I have, so we do our institute every year. That is, we do a 120-hour program every year. It's 4 weeks throughout the year. We were able to do our first week in person. I've done our second week remotely. My state association, the Municipal Clerks Association, has just decided to take its annual conference online. So I've gotten a fair amount of online experience in a very short amount of time. And I've been really impressed with how our folks have adapted. Although I did get an email from a clerk who went through the Institute last year saying that she felt sorry for this year's clerks because, of course, the in-person, the connections people make are so very important to their careers. For me, I actually do a lot of the teaching in our institute, and so I've had to overhaul lots of materials for the sessions. It's been a tremendous amount of work. I do think, obviously you lose some things, important qualitative things when you move to online. I did see a few advantages. There were sessions I hadn't revised in a while that I thought I need to revise them, and I had to take them online. Some of them got better because of that. But the thing that you miss, I think, more than anything over Zoom is energy. It's hard to get that going. There's something about being there in person. And I'm sure there were probably, I don't think I was able to go into as much depth as I could have in person for some of the sessions, but so I don't see us transforming our institute into an all online program, but this has forced us to look at what's possible and what can be good about online education.
Thank you, Trey. Kelly, you want to chime in on anything?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, Trey's right. There's a lot of things with online that get missed, like the energy. Maureen was talking about the connection at the institutes. There's a lot of fear, I think, right now, and I'm able to talk to our members every single day when going over their certification applications, and that's the number one thing that we're being asked, especially when talking about online and institute, is we need the institutes. We are always encouraging our members to go to the institutes, not just for points, but we know that the state specific education that they need is at those institutes. So they are vital. We need them. That's a lot of reasons why they're also being encouraged to double check with your institute director to see when they're planning on having the next institute. I think the biggest fear that I hear more than anything is if the institutes don't run on land again. Or I need my 60 education points, but I'm 30 away. If I take every webinar I can find out there, I'm still not going to get certified. My city needs me to get certified. I have been told that I'm going to get a raise next year if I do. I'm afraid of losing my job with the way that the economy is going, and this is my backup. This is exactly what I need to show that I am worthy and I deserve to be where I'm at. So that's just my opinion on from what I hear on a daily. We know we need institutes. They know they need institutes. That connection they need. So I feel like we're all going in the right direction in this temporary time, with online and hybrids, everything that we can do. Yeah, I see in the chat that costs and budgets are a huge factor, especially with everything that's going on right now too. So there's a lot of fear out there. That's it.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, remember everyone that you work with specifically with your state, your country, the people that you serve in your local area. As staff, we hear from everybody across the globe, and we get everything from tears to frustration to anger. We tend to be the hub that they come to say, you guys are IIMC, what are you doing? How are you helping? This isn't right. We have a lot of our members whose jobs are contingent upon them receiving their CMC or MMC in X amount of years. A lot of new hires have been hired with the agreement to fulfill their CMC or MMC requirements in X amount of years. Usually 2 to 3 is what we're seeing. So there's a lot of those members right now that if we don't continue to offer something and give them some ways to continue to move forward, that it's a possibility, a real possibility, that their contracts are going to expire. They're going to lose their job. We've had a ton of feedback regarding budgets, travel, even the virtual institute, the $50 that we were charging for those is too expensive for people. There's people that will not be able to travel for 2 to 3 years because of the loss of revenue in the cities themselves or the towns themselves. So we're dealing with a lot of different factors. So part of our goal today is to make sure that you are armed with everything that you need to be able to navigate through not just the next few weeks, next few months, but until we are able to meet again next year at the Colloquium. We can obviously do pop-up meetings between now and then, and we want to continue conversations, but please feel free to ask questions and gather information from everybody on the call today. That way you feel really confident that you can go in and serve those people that still need us, that you can continue to add value for the money that they're paying for whatever programs you're developing. So what else do we want to cover? What else do we want to talk about?
Could I can't find my hand raising thing. I can unmute, but I can't find my hand. Can I just make a comment? Because one of the points that I think we are doing is we're going on the assumption that people that were hired and told they have to get their CMC within 2 years, that their employers now aren't going to also understand that a pandemic means that those kinds of expectations may be unrealistic. If the educational experiences and the ability to budget aren't there, I can't imagine someone firing someone because they weren't able to receive the training. Everything's on hold, you know, and so I think we need to be a little more aware that all the rules have changed. This is an extraordinary time. And when people are in a panic, my first thought was, I offer 90 hours a year. I've been exploring it. I can't take the 90 hours online. Some of the courses just don't translate online. I can do some of the talking head type. So my thought is, if I offer less hours, maybe it'll take you 6 months longer to get your CMC. But as long as we're offering things and progressing and showing good faith, I can't imagine that anyone at this point is at risk with those kinds of expectations. I think we just need to maybe guide them and encourage them and say, you may need to go back and talk to your supervisor and explain that it's hard for us to implement things because we're literally being expected to invent things on the spur of the moment. We've been doing this for a couple of weeks when you think about it, in comparison to a year to plan programs. So I think that's part of why it's so good for us to be talking with the IMC staff. So I think we have to have an approach where we calm people down and we help them to understand this is really a very unique situation, and they need to be able to articulate that to someone. I'd be shocked at a boss who'd fire somebody because they didn't get their CMC.
Thank you for sharing, Maureen. All we're doing is passing on feedback. These are realistic comments. These are real ones that we've had. But I completely agree that we do need to be armed with responses, with answers. So I know there's a couple of other hands up and we'll go to those, but I want you to think about and drop it in the chat box. Do you have a canned response that you're giving people? Do you have resources that you're passing on to your members saying exactly that our expectation is that we can continue to educate you, but here's what we're working with. Have we leveled with the members that we're serving or the participants that we're serving, and let them know what you're also struggling with, that you want to maintain a high level of education, but it's simply not practical in a couple weeks time span. So drop something in the chat for me if you've developed those resources, if you have something, if you're willing to share those. We talked about that resource center, and this is something that if you have something you want your members in your state or your area to hear, send that to IIMC staff. That way we can say, when we talk to a California clerk and they say we have 3 employees in our office, those without the CMC are the first ones that are losing their jobs because the city can't afford to pay all our salaries now. So how do you want us to respond to those on your behalf? So let us know what you guys have in terms of resources, share information with us. That way we're all sending out the same message together. So I know I saw Ellen had a hand up, and I'm sorry, there was one other one, I missed it, but, oh, Linda. Ellen, go ahead and unmute yourself, chime in.
All I was going to say was that, you know, budgets are tight, people aren't able to travel. So for Nebraska, I think one of the things we're going to try and do is find out if we can work with our association's board to offer more scholarships so that people can come. Maybe this is a way that we as institute directors could work with IIMC's Education Foundation and help our clerks get what they need through some collaboration. And I don't know what that looks like, but I think we have to not only listen to what our clerks want, and if it is, I want to be able to go to the institute, how can we help them do that? Here are some options. You can apply to IIMC's foundation. You can apply to your local association. I know our association has some money sitting there that we could give the opportunity to clerks to get that experience. And if they don't want to come forward because they're embarrassed, then maybe we have to reach out to them and say, hey, it's your lucky day. We just found money for you to go to whatever it might be. Also using some of your sponsors. We worked with a company this year, and they offered up $3,000 worth of scholarships, and they're looking to do that over the next 5 years. So I think we as institute directors, it's part of our responsibility too to help clerks so that they can reach the goals that they want.
Thank you, Ellen. Absolutely. Yeah, the foundation is something that we're also going to have to really look at moving forward. We work on a fiscal year with the foundation in terms of scholarship funding. So we go from July to July, May to June, July, somewhere in there is when the deadline starts and the new program runs. Last funding period, I believe we had 44 scholarship applications come in-house. So 15,000 members, I think it was 44 scholarship applications total. That's CMC, institute scholarships, all of that, 44. The foundation only had enough funds to fund 9. So when we look realistic, are our funding programs going to be helpful coming out of this? It's really a conversation that our board is going to have with the foundation as well. But with your input would be fantastic. These are the members that we're driving your way in terms of those scholarships. They're going to attend the institute and academies. And if we can't fund everyone, how do we collaboratively work together to find more money, one, but make sure that when they have that money, where are they going? What are they going to do with it? So just a thought. Thank you, Ellen. Linda, I know you wanted to chime back in. Go ahead.
I basically was going to say the same thing that Ellen said.
Okay.
I encourage our clerks to go to the, Arizona Municipal Clerks Association. It's a resource, for those members. Scholarships are available. There is understanding regarding the economy, the situation that we're in, speaking to what Maureen said. People are aware. And I think it's the clerks just trying to find an outside of their employment support. Hey, this is happening with their fear. And I feel that the state organizations, us as institute directors, providing maybe even a script, I say certain things to them, reach out to Arizona Municipal Clerks Association, IAMC, there's alternative education points available. There's state free resources for seminars if they haven't been approved. Our League of Cities and Towns provides seminars at lower cost. So, there's a lot out there. It's just getting that message to them. And I feel that the state association for the clerks is that landing homepage for them. They can reach out to me with any questions that they have. I will take that information, try to find the answer or connect them to somebody that has that information. But it is the fear for them, and it is knowing who they can reach out to get some type of positive feedback. You're not going to lose your job. Your employer should understand. And that's what's happened in Arizona, that people do understand. We don't expect you to have the CMC done within 3 years.
Thank you, Linda. I would love, Cassie, if you're willing to unmute, you dropped an interesting comment about what's happening with your institute. Now, Cassie is one of the few that has gone completely online for July. So I'd be really curious if you're willing, Cassie, talk about those numbers you dropped in the chat and let us know where you're at and what's going on with you.
We actually are going to have the largest institute we ever had. People are really excited about it. And when I switched, I made it a very positive thing. And although you can't do everything that you do live, you can really do a lot if you learn the software. And we're spending a lot of time learning how to use Zoom, because that was really created for educators. And we're working with our instructors to make it as close to what we can to the pedagogy that we normally deliver. And I know it's not going to be the same. And there are some people that said, well, we're not going to come because we want the networking. And we refunded their money. But we have it. And for those that wanted it, they're signing up. There's a lot of people who have never been able to come because we've never been online. And so we facilitated a lot of smaller communities up north that are so excited that they get to attend for the first time ever. And our associations are really, that we're aligned with, are really generous at raising scholarship money, and this year awarded $19,000 worth of scholarships to their members to come to our institute. So very supportive. And we also advertise about the scholarships starting in December, so people know anybody who really wants to come to our program can come because of the money. They, as long as they're a member of the Clerks Association and the Treasurers Association, they can come because they want their people educated, and that is what their mission is. So I'm very lucky that Wisconsin is so supportive.
Thank you for sharing, Cassie. I appreciate it. I mean, it just shows there's the different ends of the spectrums, and there's no saying that one way is right, one way is wrong. I don't think we're ever going to find this is the way it is across the board. So it's just interesting, especially from staff perspective, knowing that what we hear from the members, it's interesting to see from each of your perspectives what you're experiencing, what you're hearing, and what you're doing. Along the same lines, Cassie, I'm curious, and we did get an email asking drafting budgets for September, which is going to be all online, and the costs to running that program are different. Is there anyone, Cassie, I'm looking at you, that would be willing to weigh in on how you're now scheduling your pricing, how you're looking at the cost of the institute, the cost of attending now that the overhead is a little bit different? Are we adjusting? Are prices the same? Has anybody had this similar conversation or bounced around these ideas? And what can you weigh in? Who can share? Cassie, you want to chime in at all?
We stayed the same. We don't cost that much in the first place. And what has happened when we've worked through the stuff, we have a pretty good budget of people that we pay. We don't use free people normally. There are free people, but there aren't a lot of them. So we spend a lot of money. And what's also happened is because we've got so many classes, there's 75 being delivered. We've got to, in every single one of those courses that we're offering, like you have somebody here to help you. You've got Karen. We've got people that are going to have to be in there. We can't just leave people sit there and hope to God they can use this software, because they probably can't. So we've got monitors. So it takes more time, takes more effort. We're training people, and I picked Zoom because I knew my people attending are using it, so they would be comfortable. And then I knew my instructors were using it, so they would be comfortable. And we are training our attendees, and we are training our instructors. So it's costing money, even though it's not, and saving them a ton in hotel, mileage, meals. So they're coming out pretty good.
Thank you for sharing. Cassie, what is your normal registration fee, or if you don't mind, what are you charging for this round?
$489.
And how many points do they get?
We're offering 253 hours of education. So, and each track is getting, I think, about 34 to 36 hours of education.
Okay, so pretty standard with what you're traditionally offering in person, right? In terms of the money to the points, yeah. Okay.
It's exactly.
Okay. Anybody else have that same issue? I know we got the email. I hope that helps to the person that asked it. But is there anybody else that's kind of overhauled? I know there's a couple chats in there with answers. Taking the funds not used and apply them towards scholarships. Price covers fixed costs and speakers. The reduction, but there's no travel costs. Is there anybody else that wants to weigh in on pricing or points per dollar per point, anything like that we're working with, or questions you have? And again, we want to make sure that you guys are armed and confident moving forward to be able to handle whatever comes our way over the next few weeks, months, even the next year. So if there's a topic that we haven't addressed or something we haven't looked at, please feel free to ask. Now's your chance. Okay, well, what I thought we would do is take a peek. We got a few minutes before we'll take a break, but I thought we would look at the feedback that we actually got from you guys. So I sent you the spreadsheet. I didn't go through and color coordinate it and kind of find the trends within it this time. They didn't really exist. So in terms of the data that we got, we wanted to find out what programs or platforms you are using, and these questions came directly from Institute directors. So I asked you all to send feedback to us on what do you want to gather ahead of time beforehand. And these are the questions that came back. So let me share my screen and we can take a look at what we're at in terms of what we're using. So we started out with the platforms. What kind of technology are you currently using to deliver online if you're online? And this was just as a reference. Maybe there's a software, Cassie, like Zoom, because everybody's familiar with it. Obviously, IIMC is using that as well. But we have heard from other individuals that their municipality will not let them use Zoom. So we wanted to know what else was out there in case you have people in that same situation that you need to serve. So going through them, we found these were the options that people were using to host virtual sessions. We had a lot of Blackboards, we had WebEx, Desire to Learn. Some of these had one person using them. Others, such as Blackboard and Zoom, tended to be the most popular with multiple individuals using them. So you have the spreadsheet. If there's a software or technology that you're not familiar with, that you want more information on, the email addresses for those that are using them are also there. So as a resource to you, you know who is using what and how to reach out to them. So I encourage you guys to make those connections and continue the conversations off screen. So the second question we asked was, if you're recording the sessions, what are you currently using to record, or where are you hosting them? Where are you putting them? So again, we got quite a bit of feedback, a lot different. Zoom was a great recording option. We saw that one throughout, but we also saw MediaSite, WebEx again, GoToTraining, Swivel, TechSmith Relay. Lots of different versions. So if you're not sure what they are or what they're being used for and you're curious, please reach out to that individual that was running that technology. The third question we had was assessments. Obviously, assessments are still required, whether you're online or in person, and we wanted to know what type of assessments you're offering, and then are they proctored? That was something that one of our institute directors really was interested in. So we took a look at what you gave us, and there was a lot of online quizzes, multiple choice quizzes, fill in the blanks, true and false, a lot of in-depth quizzes. We also saw ideas to actions, that those were still being used. Various testing and survey options, Canvas, forms. We didn't hear anything about Google Forms, but we know some of the associations were using Google Forms as well. So just some options for you. And again, the contact info is attached to that spreadsheet for you. So looking at, before we wrap up online learning today, looking at the future. So based on kind of what we've talked about during the first 3 hours 2 weeks ago, what we've heard from today, the data that we've given you in terms of the 2 spreadsheets we've passed on with the contact info, the resources, I would love for you to continue the conversation about, do you feel confident that should a disaster strike in the future, whatever kind of disaster it is, doesn't have to be COVID, or do you feel confident in your ability to react proactively and do what you need to do to continue your institute moving forward, to continue your position moving forward, as well as your clerks learning? And should a disaster strike, are there opportunities for institute collaboration? Is it possible to work together without encroaching on each other's territory? And how can we, as IIMC and Education Department, how can we support you now and as we move forward into the future? So what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is open the chat box and see if you guys want to wrap up this session as a large group, or if you would like to go into breakout rooms. I am happy to put you in either option. We can continue the conversation here, or we can break up into smaller groups. So there are a few of us, so we can have pretty intimate conversations in those breakouts, or we can stay here. So please drop that in the chat box for me and let me know what you would like to do, and we can let you move forward from there. I see breakout, 1 vote for that. I see a large group, the whole group. All right, give me a few more votes, guys. Drop it in there. Large group, large group. Okay. So from what I'm seeing, it looks like large groups are where we want to stay. So let's stay here. Taking these questions then, let's realistically look at them. And now these questions, again, are just thoughts that we want you to ponder. Do you have the info you need? Can we collaborate? Are we encroaching? And how do we support you? So somebody chime in. Where do you want to start? Pick one of the questions. Doesn't have to be in any particular order. But give us feedback. Are these possible? Do you have what you need? And how can we help you do it? If we can at all, let us know. Is it possible? So anybody want to raise hand? Let me take a peek here. You can also just drop things in the chat box if you're not comfortable speaking out loud. I know these questions aren't fun ones. They're definitely not. I know these ones make you think. So
something that I can see being useful for on the last question there, something I've been dealing with all this morning is maybe whoever is responsible for your event planning with IMC is maybe doing a short session or some information on working with these contracts and putting in provisions about how to plan for an in-person event, but potentially deal with the cancellation side with these hotels and facilities. Luckily, the university has a legal team, obviously, and they're supporting us with that. But I think it's something that we're going to have to really pay attention to going forward, because like I got a contract from a large hotel group today, and they had put some really crazy things in there regarding cancellations that normally had not been in there in the past. So
thank you, Jason. Yeah, no, that's a great idea. IIMC ran into contract issues when we decided to cancel our annual conference. We had to look at when do we make that final decision based on what are the penalties for making that decision. So I know our event management team, which is a company that we've worked with for years, and Chris had to really go back and forth with the hotel and negotiate and get things taken care of. Luckily, we were able to get out of that, and Chris, feel free to weigh in, without any penalties to IIMC, which was great. We're going to take that conference and everything back into 2020, oh gosh, what are we, 2024? So it's definitely something we need to think about, and we can, as IIMC, we're happy to research to see if our event management team would be willing to talk to you guys all and see what we can do to pass on information. Chris, did you want to chime in?
Jason, I think that's a great idea, and we can certainly do something similar to this for anybody who's interested. I think with us, as in any contract, it's really more relationship, because insurance pretty much dropped the ball on everything regarding that, for obvious reasons, I guess. But yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea, and I can easily get back to all of you in the next 2-3 weeks and see if there's interest, and we can set it up.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Jason.
Now, I know there's some chats going on in the chat box, disaster preparedness, so take a peek through there. Now, these questions are meant to be looked at and are meant to be talked about with that open mindset and that open conversation that we talked about in the very beginning. So if there are comments that are not so positive, we are open to hearing those as well. So if you feel like this is not something that IIMC and the Institute directors can collaborate on, if you feel like these are individual responsibilities, we want to hear that too. We as a department have never shied away from tough conversations, even when there's disagreements. So if you disagree that we can collaborate, let us hear it. This is your chance to voice your opinion. We want to hear what you have to say. So in terms of disaster preparedness, there's a couple of comments in there that we can take a peek at. Amy wants to know, she liked the idea of the virtual institute, and is there going to be a round 2? Great question, Amy. With the virtual institute, it wasn't our intention to do this long term. It's never been our intention. Our intention was to create a program to solve a problem now and let the members feel like we are still supporting you. We also, as a department, wanted to support the institutes 100%, which is why we're giving all of the revenue back to the institutes. We're keeping an administrative fee to cover our technology, and that's it. So our intention wasn't to do it, and what we're planning on doing is looking at reevaluating about 6 weeks in. We're on week 2. So in about 6 weeks, we'll look at it, and we want to talk with the IIMC board. We want to talk with the institute directors to see if there's even interest in continuing. We also want to talk with the Education and Professional Development Committee and let them know what's going on, how it's been received, provide real data, real comments, real feedback to see if we want to continue. Now, part of the hesitation here, and this is a conversation I am completely willing to have if anybody wants to jump in, is that sense of competition, that sense of encroaching on your territory. So the partnership that we've put together with these institutes has been a complete partnership. It hasn't been IIMC totally. It hasn't been institute directors totally. The fees and the registration are being processed through IIMC, but it's all coming back. So we are willing to continue to partner. We're willing to continue to collaborate, but we can't do it by ourselves. So ultimately, it would be up to the institutes. Do we want to continue something like this? If the institutes are involved, then we can pass that on to the board of directors saying, yes, this is an option. Here's what the institute directors are willing to do. So is there any feedback on a round 2 or continuing this? Has there been any other interest? I know I've gotten a couple of emails from certain states and certain IDs that say, I really kind of wish I would have done round 1, but if you do it again in round 2, let me know. So what are the thoughts on collaborating in terms of this type of program as a potential in the future? Kim, I saw your finger pop up. Tell me what's on your mind.
Well, as much as I appreciate the revenue, right, that comes in our particular financial model, it's not a requirement that I get that. And so I know that that's a different perspective. Everybody has different requirements put on them by their institutions or whatever. But I just really feel that I have to consider my clerks, right? And what do they need? And if I'm not able to provide it, then, and this year we're going to try. I still don't know what's going to happen in September with our institute, but I want them to have all the opportunities to continue that we can. And I think even under normal circumstances, I know that several of mine, especially the younger ones who come in, who want to, get it done. I know that they've used all kinds of other opportunities, and a lot of them have gotten their certification in 2 years instead of 3 or whatever. And so I don't want to be an impediment to anyone else's completion of their credential, right? And I can't control, that. And so I personally just don't worry about it. They're going to get their points. I would rather they get their points, through our institute. But if that's not where they get all of them, okay. So personally, I would love to see round 2 happen. I know that our folks are interested for sure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the comments. Ashley, I know you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I 100% agree with Kim. Thank you for putting that out there. I think, of course, we want to see our clerks come to our home institute, but this is about them and about their education. So if we can make that available for them any way we can, that's kind of our responsibility and our duty. Having said that, I would love to be involved in round 2 as an educator and being able to provide that. I don't think that very many of our clerks in Montana will participate, mostly because of the cost, because municipal budgets are tight everywhere. Montana's, I think, even worse. So it's pricing them out of a market, but that's okay, because we want to be collaborative with the rest of the institutes across the country. And if we can help provide education, even if it's not for our clerks, we're happy to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, the budgets are definitely something we're going to have to look at. When we originally brought this idea forward as staff, when we bounced it around, there was no fee to the member at all. We weren't planning on collecting a registration fee at all, because we had an idea of what was coming. And in order to make everybody feel comfortable and make sure that it was worth the time of the institute directors, and also to hold people accountable, we wanted to put that fee into place. That way there was some kind of accountability and there was some kind of requirement for the participants to come in. So there's a couple of comments in the chat that I'd like everybody to take a peek at. There's not so much differing opinions, but just the other side of it. Yes, we can collaborate, and yes, we can work together, but there's credentialing not meant to be easy and fast. We don't want to dilute it. There's also information in there. We'd like to see the 6-week stats. So can somebody unmute and let me know what kind of stats we can provide you with specifically that would help you be able to formulate a decision, because we can provide you with how many seats we had, how many sold out, how many emails that we got asking for us to add additional seats, how many minutes the session sold out in. What kind of other statistics would you be looking for us to provide you with?
Are you doing, I'm sorry, this is Morgan. I didn't
Morgan.
have a hand either.
That's okay.
Are you doing a post survey of each session and a final post survey of the virtual conference to the attendees?
Right now, we haven't done a post-survey session or a post-session survey. We can put that in place, though. We've been taking individual feedback from the participants, and we've been taking their assessments, but we haven't done a final survey. I would like to around that 6-week mark in order to get the feedback from those participants that have done it. Some of them will have attended multiple sessions. We do have duplicate registrations in session 1 and session 2. Some of them will have only attended 1. So I think it'd be really great to get that feedback. And if you have questions that you feel would be good to build into that, we're happy to send that survey out and get some more information.
Yeah, I would like the demographic information included, but I will email you. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we collect registrations, everyone, as an FYI, Region 8 is the highest attended in these region, or that we're able to see in these 2 virtual institute. Region 8 has been the #1 in terms of leading the registrations. Who and where, we're able to see what country they're from, what state they're from. Part of the update we made to the registration form this second time around was we wanted to know what designation you're pursuing, CMC or MMC. Was your institute canceled? And what institute do you normally attend? So we put that into the registration form. So I'll have that data for session 2, not for session 1. But we're making those tweaks and we're trying to figure out what it is we need to know as we move forward. But we're happy to share all of that information with you in terms of who's coming from where. Ellen, I see your little blue hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just, I agree with what other people have said, but I think we have to look at this as a much bigger issue too. We have to look at, as we move to being a more diverse and inclusive organization, we have to look at the fact that not all clerks around the country or internationally have the same abilities to come to either our own institutes or IIMC's conference. So I think this is something that we need to take into consideration if we are truly to become a more diverse and inclusive organization. As much as I want clerks to come to my institute and academy, the people on the western part of the state don't like to travel very far because the cities they perceive that we're going to are big and bad and violent, and that's not the case. But I think we do have to look at it from an inclusive and diverse piece too, if that's the goal of our organization too.
Thank you, Ellen. There's a question in the chat that I'd like to address though. Joan wants to know, not to go down the rabbit hole, but who's tracking what virtual courses people are taking and if they're receiving appropriate mix. Now keep in mind that certifications, I'm assuming that's what we're referring to, certification has its own set of guidelines. There are institute guidelines and there are education guidelines, and all of those applications are being reviewed according to the education guidelines. There is no requirement in those education guidelines for participants to take X amount of state-specific courses, X amount of institute courses, X amount of communication. There are no specific guidelines that require that. The point systems that are in place, the categories that are in place have all been board approved, board directed. So there isn't somebody sitting there saying, well, this person has taken 3 courses on communication, they can't have credit for one of these. We don't have that oversight. We don't have that justification for not doing it. There are people taking multiple sessions on the same topic, if you will, such as communication, but communication offered by 3 different facilitators through 3 different organizations can be very, very different communication sessions. So IIMC doesn't have the oversight in our guidelines and the way that we work to be able to tell somebody, no, you can only take X amount of these courses. The only oversight we have is in terms of Athenian dialogues. you can only attend 6 Athenian dialogues or 18 points, depending on the year they took those sessions in, and apply those towards your certification. So that's realistically, in terms of education programs, the only one that we can deny above and beyond a certain point. So as we're going through, like we discussed at the last meeting, as we're going through the Institute and Education Guideline overview, those are things that we're looking at with fresh eyes, and with the Education and Professional Development Committee. And Angie, who's our chair, Angie Johnson, is on this call today. So that's something, hey Angie, that's something that will be coming down the line that we are looking at. So keep that in mind, that Kelly and I, when we're looking at applications, we're not saying, oh, Angie already took 2 communication courses, she can't have a third. Or, oops, she already took Public Administration 101. Yes, she can't take Public Administration 101, but could she take Public Administration 2? So there's varying things that we look at as we go through those applications, but we are definitely looking with that guidelines in mind. That is our Bible, that is our review. So I'm not sure if that helps, but hopefully that gives you an idea of how we review those applications. Let me catch up with the chat. Linda, go ahead. While I'm catching up, you go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have a hand function besides my own. I just wanted to mention regarding the quality of the speakers, because normally we all do surveys. We want the feedback. We want to know that we have professional speakers. And that's always a huge concern. Are they a fit? Or are they not a good fit? And I think that's where I want to make sure that the clerks are getting that knowledge, that they are able to apply it to their work environment. So we've always done surveys to get the feedback from the participants. I do not believe, and we have our virtual institute next Thursday in Ashley, as far as receiving the feedback from the participants on how the seminar was, on how the knowledge was learned, and how the facilitator engaged. To me, that is very important. And if we're not at this time gathering that data, I wouldn't even mind. I always do the surveys myself and send them out. I mean, that's something I would be willing to do. I would like to do, because I want to know that people are gaining what they're supposed to gain and applying it properly.
Thank you for that. And that was when the conversation was originally brought up, that was something that I was thinking, that we are going to provide all the institute directors with the registration list, including the emails. So if there's things that the institute directors themselves, again, this is a collaborative partnership. IIMC has been doing all of the logistics behind the scenes. So if there's something that we want to add on to that, we do need help. Realistically, we will need help to do that. So if the IDs, Linda, if you're willing to help me put that survey together and run that through your tech, I would love to do that. I know Karen can help us out too, and we can all work together, but we can get that feedback collaboratively and then provide that to everybody as a group as we move forward through. Let me catch up into the chat. Fast doesn't necessarily mean easy. 2 years of membership. Yes, Kim, we do still require 2 years of membership. There's no negotiation on that. There's no backdating. We get all kinds of requests to fast track that. And that's one that we've been very, very adamant about, making no exchanges to no changes at all. Let's see, the sooner they become certified. Okay. So anything else? Did I miss anybody? I don't want anybody to feel like they didn't get heard today before we wrap up online learning, or anything else for the good of the order in terms of, do you feel confident and how can we support you? I love Jason's idea of giving us something tangible that we can run away with and actually make happen for you. So if there are other things that we can do, please share. We want to hear. No? Okay. All right. Well, great conversation. I know some of the stuff in the chat, I know that these aren't easy conversations, everyone, but remember that fear zone is what keeps us out of having these conversations. Disagreements are healthy, differing opinions are healthy, diversity is healthy. So if you agree with us, if you don't agree with us, if you agree with each other, it doesn't matter. Just continue to have the conversations. If you're not comfortable doing them on camera or in the chat, you are welcome to send me an email directly. I'll be happy to continue conversations with you offline. Not a problem. I do not shy away from those kind of conversations, and I find that those are the kinds where I understand you guys the most, and we start to understand our membership and how our triangular partnership really, really works. We all get an opportunity to grow and move forward. So why don't we take, let's say, a 10-minute break. It's 10:20 here, my time, California. Why don't we take a 20-minute break, and then we'll pivot and start talking about the other half of the conversation, which will revolve around the vacancy in the Director of Professional Development position. So if you want to shut your cameras down, whatever you need, take a break, and we will see you back in about 10 minutes. Back, if you had your cameras on and you want to keep them on, go ahead and pop them back on. I am going to get my screen all set up. Now, Chris, are you back yet? Let's see if he's in.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead, guys, and transition into Director of Professional Development. I have the data that you guys sent us. I have all of the information that we kind of gathered, and I have some ideas of where we can take the conversation. But ultimately, the point of this conversation is to gather your feedback. As an FYI, we will be running a similar conversation with the Education and Professional Development Committee to get their feedback on what they would like to see from a member perspective in this position. So Chris, before I dive into that, is there anything that you want to add in, anything you want to say before we start moving forward with the conversation?
I think you've covered it. I'm looking forward to the feedback from this group as well as the committee, and see if we can't create a composite and move from there.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with everyone. That way we can get into the slides and just take a peek at some of the feedback that we got. So our Director of Professional Development, we all know that Dr. Jane Long contract expired on May 31st. So the intention of this conversation is to figure out what direction do we want to go? Who are we looking for? What is this person going to help us with? What is this person going to help you with? So really just to get a good idea as we go into this hunt for the position, who are we looking for? What does this person need to do? What should they specialize in? So what we did was asked you a couple of questions in your registration form. And these were the 4 questions. We wanted to know what type of professional experience this person would be desirable to have. Oops, excuse me. And we got varying responses all the way across the board with these. We also wanted to know what criteria should we look for? How do you see this relationship evolving with the institutes in the years to come? And then what role did you see this individual having in supporting you as ID and your institutes? So we looked at the spreadsheet, and you all have it in front of you. If you registered late for this meeting and you didn't get a copy of it and you want it, just drop me an email when we get out of the meeting today, and I will forward that to you as well. So we looked at it from the same perspective that we did when we looked at the online learning. We looked for the green, yellows, reds. We looked at for themes. We looked to see if there was trends in there. And what we came to the conclusion of is that there really isn't that much that we could grasp onto. There is ideas and there's thoughts in the data, but there wasn't a consistent or a clear direction. So we pulled what we could out of it, and we're hoping to get a little bit more feedback today and maybe a little more concrete of an idea of what it is that you guys would like to see in that position and how they support you. So what we pulled out of it, and again, this is just based on taking a look at those little squares, those little feedback, is that in terms of professional experience, we were kind of all over the place, but all slightly tied together. Oops, excuse me. So we had individuals that wanted doctorates, PhDs. We had individuals that specifically said a PhD wasn't required. Master's degree, we saw 10+ years in education, leadership training, teaching, administering certificate programs, professional development programs, teaching, online learning development expertise, government and clerk experience even came up, public administration, curriculum development. So really across the board, all kind of playing into what IIMC does and what you all do, but really no direction in terms of, it wasn't consistent that everybody felt this person should have a master's degree with 10 years. Everyone didn't feel that this should be a clerk or have government experience with a PhD. So there really wasn't a consistent thread throughout. But what we were able to pull was there was a couple of themes when we asked you what it is that you were looking for this person to support you on or to be able to help you with. We found that most of the answers came down to 3 categories. So bullets 2, 3, and 4 here were development. You were looking for somebody that could help develop programs, develop criteria, create guidelines, help you with curriculum planning development, the actual nitty-gritty of putting together your institute. The second thread that we saw through there were more of an advisory resource mentor capacity. So we were looking for someone to provide advice on best practices, new and innovative delivery methods, problem solving, helping gather licensing for software or other learning tools. And then the last one was facilitating. Quite a few of you had said that we want somebody that can come out and teach and present or facilitate at the Institute and academies. So going into the conversation today, looking at all of this data that we gathered, looking at kind of a direction, but not really, we'd really like to take the next hour or so and figure out what do the Institute directors really want and what do the Institute directors really need. So before we get going into the next part of the slide, oh, we got a couple of people popping in still. Are there any immediate questions that we need to address before we go through? Does anybody have any burning questions that we got to know right up front before we start the conversation? Okay. So knowing what we know and looking at the data and looking at where we found the commonalities, it came to our minds that we kind of know what we want, we kind of don't know what we want, but it also came out that we don't really know who we're looking for specifically. We can't create that picture, we can't create that individual, we can't see that individual in our heads. And I started to think, well, why can't we? What's happening? What is the information telling us? And why can't we translate that into a job description, into a person? So we wanted to bring you guys the idea, the thought process that, let me go back in here and take a peek at this next slide. So just some food for thought. When we looked at the questions that we asked you to tell us what you want, what do you think this person should do, paint this picture for us, but it's not very clear based on the responses. So how do we know who we're looking for if we don't know where we're going? It became very clear to me, at least, that in order to figure out who we're looking for and who we need to find, how do we get real specific about that person? We got to figure out where we want to go before we figure out who's going to help us get there. So I thought what we could do, if it's okay with everyone, is work backwards a little bit. So where are we going? We've had now 4.5 hours of conversation regarding online learning. We've had conversations about taking your institutes from in-person to online, but making sure we maintain that program in person when we're able to do so. So a lot of information that has taken us into the past, where we are now, and made us really think about the future and where we're going. So keeping all of that in mind, where do we see IIMC going? Where do we see the education department going? And where do we see clerk education going in the next few years? So let's take a peek at some thoughts that I want you guys to bounce around. And for this one, we can stay in a large group or we can break into breakouts. And I'll ask you to drop that in the chat for me if you want to stay as a large group or as a smaller groups. But I want you to consider where we or you, this doesn't have to be a we collaborative if that's not the way that you view this group of individuals. It can be you individually or we as a whole. Where are we now? Consider 5 to 10 years from now, where do we want to go? What do we want to look like as an organization as a whole or as an individual institute director? And then also 15 years from now, thinking big term, I really want you to look through that telescope and really look big vision here. So a couple of questions that we would like you to look at. And it sounds like we got a mix of large group and breakouts. So let's give a couple more seconds to drop some more votes in there. But what we want you to look at is what are some collective goals we have as a group, and oh, excuse my typo, or you have individually. So where do you see your institute going in the next 5, 10, 15 years? How does IIMC help you get there? What is that partnership going to look like? And then the big one that we really want to know, the main takeaway that we're looking to get out of you today is what are you and your institute currently not getting or not receiving from your partnership with IIMC that you need to help take you into that future, to help take you into that 5 to 10 years, and to help take you into that 15 years and beyond. So how does this new individual help us get there? So let's look at questions number 1 and 2 here. The what are some collective goals, and what are you and your institute currently not receiving that you need? So before we open this conversation up, it looks like we're going to stay in the large group. And I do see some notes to me saying that Kim has some information or a great question that would be helpful. So go ahead, Kim, go ahead and unmute and let us know. I'll stop sharing the screen here to put you on.
Okay. I tagged it because I'm sitting here eating my lunch. So, no, my question was just, hang on, I'll find it in here. It was just about maybe you or Chris could talk about what the job descriptions have been in the past. Like what did we expect of that person, and then why or if we think it needs to be different now.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, great question.
Background, I think, would help the people who haven't been around a long time.
Okay, perfect. Chris.
Can I chime in on that? Because the one thing that I keep thinking is we need to look at the future, but for those of us who've been around through multiple directors, I think why we weren't successful in the past or what the issues were in the past could really help shape this conversation, because I think some of us have some fairly good idea about why some of the directors didn't work out, so that we don't make the same mistake, because history is the best teacher.
Yep, absolutely. There is no future without the past. So when we created this conversation or this thought, definitely want to take it from what we've learned. We can't move forward unless we really embrace what we've learned, the mistakes that we've made, what we're doing now, and meshing it all together to help us carry those into the future. We don't want to repeat the same mistakes, if you want to call them mistakes. So Chris, do you mind giving a brief history of the Director of Education, Director of Professional Development, and how we got to be where we are now?
Yes, thank you. And I thought that was a good point by Maureen as well. The last time IMC had a full-time Director of Education or Professional Development was from 2005 through 2009, which proved disastrous. The gentleman before that also proved disastrous. And then for a brief time, we had somebody in here for less than 90 days that didn't seem to work. A big part of that is in terms of hiring someone. Generally, most people that come from the outside don't really understand the whole relationship between IMC and the institutes and the associations. So for them, it's more or less they're bringing an experience of a wholly owned, run nonprofit where they make the decisions in terms of what education is, and they present that and go forward with that, as opposed to working collaboratively on this type of a level. That's where the friction occurs. Because as we've noticed over the years that the institutes have their own programs that are in conjunction with what the guidelines are and don't really need that kind of oversight. And that's one of the first mistakes that somebody new coming in would be doing. Those types of soft skills are very difficult to find. You can get someone with a background, you can get someone that has, non-accreditation type of nonprofit education programs and so forth. The technical fundamental aspects of the job are not difficult to find. I've got a litany of things in terms of duties and responsibilities that most people could do. It's really that type of relationship. It's more of a understanding and kind of keeping a hands-off, soft touch when working with the institute. It's somebody who is not going to say it has got to be this way, and if not, then you're in trouble. So not to mention an understanding of what municipal clerks are. Our demographic, for the most part, would be different from other association demographics in the sense that these individuals are not only have the full-time jobs and family lives, they also have to tweak in their hours in order to get certified, whether it's a CMC or an MMC. Plus they have to deal with budgets and things of that nature. So it's not just I come from an education background from a university and here's how we run it. That doesn't transfer over to IMC. So that, I think, in a nutshell, And Maureen, you feel free to add to that because you've been around all these years, so we've commiserated to get to that point. So you really need someone with a soft touch, someone who, if they don't understand what institutes are, which most people won't coming in, needs to be open-minded to learn how that system works all together. So that's kind of a hodgepodge of where things did not pan out. And just to let everybody know, until we hired Dr. Long in 2016, we went without a director of education from 2009 through that time. We did work with an institute advisory group, similar that we're doing now, to help staff along that times, although we are much better ahead now in terms of resources and technology, but we're still working with an education advisory group to help staff, which is, I think, very, very important. So these are some of the things, some of the parameters that we're looking at internally, not to mention budget going into 2021. But we're not talking budget now, we're talking about if everything was great, this is what we want to look for in terms of bringing somebody on board. Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, Chris. Let me answer a couple of questions in the chat before we pop in. Will the new position be full-time, remote, or in California? Chris can chime in too, but we're definitely looking for somebody to be full-time in-house in the office.
Yes.
We started out, when Dr. Long came on a few years back, we started out having her come out once a month, thinking that a remote option could work well because she had a lot of background with IIMC. She had taught for us for a long time, consulted for us for years before that. So we felt that if a remote option was going to be a possibility, that Dr. Long would be the best fit. But right now, realistically, for coming from education perspective, department perspective, we really need somebody that can come in and really learn the organization, the structure, and the role. And to help do that, we have found, and Karen can also attest to what it's like to walk into IIMC with no background, no history, no comparable experience, that it takes those daily conversations, it takes really sitting there for those 7, 8, 9 hours a day, really absorbing everything to wrap your head around everything that makes up not only IINC, but the guidelines and all of the stuff that the education director or director of professional development would be expected to know inside and out. We have to remember too that these are guidelines, they're black and white documents. We want this individual to know them, but we want them to understand how they apply to our members and how they apply to you as institute directors. And that was the biggest thing that we had lost in translation with Dr. Long, being completely transparent, is that the documents themselves in black and white make sense, but the practical application of them and how they related to you and what you were doing, how they related to us and what we were doing and the members and what they were working with, there was a disconnect. So we're really looking for somebody full-time to be in here in-house, really collaborate with us as a team and as a whole with staff to learn all the different pieces that are coming into it. Has IIMC reached out to other associations with CEUs and professional development to see what parallels along with opportunities for the future? Great question, Morgan. Hasn't there been a difference in expectations for the position over the years that contributed to some of the issues? Yes, and Chris can chime back in too as well. When we looked at 2015, end of 2014 is when we really started looking, Chris and I, at who do we need coming into that position this last go around. And we looked at the old job descriptions, and the old job descriptions were very much an oversight capacity. You oversee the institute, you oversee the education department, you say yes or no, you're a reviewer. And in the feedback we got from you guys, it was very clear that we weren't looking for somebody to oversee, tell you what to do, cross those boundaries. So when we looked back at realistically, where are we at in 2014-15? Where do we need us to go in the next couple of years? What kind of individual did we want to look for? We weren't looking for that person to come in and be that heavy hand, dropping that iron fist, saying, no, institutes, you all have to get on that same level. We were really looking for somebody that would understand the variances that we see in all the different institute models, the types of people you serve, the types of education that you're delivering, and what did we really, really need? So my number one request back then, when Chris and I sat across from each other, I said, I need somebody, we need somebody, IIMC needs somebody that is a program development expert. Somebody that can take content, help you figure out how to translate it online, how to take it in person, the best practices, all of the different types of learning that are out there. We really need somebody in-house that can do that. Is there people out there? Is there somebody that can come in and fill in that gap that we as staff at that point, meaning just me by myself was the education department, was there somebody that could come in and work with you guys directly to put all of that together, to really give you those resources, be that expert? And we found it in Dr. Long in terms of the online learning development, the program and curriculum development, all of the stuff that you guys are asking for in that development capacity. However, we missed something in translation there. Something just didn't fit. So in terms of what we're looking for now, that's the same process that we want to go through. What is it that we did in the first round that we know didn't work? We were too heavy-handed. That person came in with too much oversight. So we switched it up and went to that program development avenue or route. Not quite working the same still. So where do we want to go now? Let me read through Joan's question real quick. I believe the position should be able to assess the clerk profession and the trends along with the trends of others for the future and continual advancement of clerks. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody that can do that. So what other feedback do we need? What other background do we need before we continue the conversation? Or is there somebody that wants to chime in with a burning question now? I don't see any hands. I don't see any chats. Okay, so let's look at those questions then to keep the conversation moving forward. Let's get really real here, really break this down. Let's get a little uncomfortable and look at, let me go back to sharing the screen with you here. Where are we going? As IIMC, as institute directors, as collaborators here, is this a collaboration effort and where do we want to go? So what are some collective goals that we have? Now we have to keep in mind going into this conversation that we just approved the strategic plan for the next 3 years and where we want to go. We do have the task force reports that unfortunately we don't have all of the information to provide to you yet because we haven't done it through with the board. But I can tell you guys that the members are asking for more distance learning, more flexibility, more options. So they're not looking to be pigeonholed into going here, doing this. They want to be able to branch out, spread their wings. So keeping that in mind with what we've heard from the members, with what we know about each other, and with what we know with where we're at, where do we want to go? Where does the IDs, where do you see the department going? Seeing our relationships develop? Does anybody want to be brave enough to step up and either drop it in the chat or to go ahead and unmute yourself, raise your hand, whatever it may be, and let us know what are some goals that you or we have as a group for the next 5, 10, 15 years. You're welcome just to unmute yourself. If we don't get anybody, we may start calling on people just to, Camilla Pittman, I know you have your hand raised, go ahead.
Unmute, okay. One quick question, you referenced to what the members are asking for. Is this through a survey or how are you getting the responses that you've expressed to us?
Well, what we've done is looked at that task force report. And like I said, I can't give you everything simply because the board hasn't looked at it. And Camilla, you know that the board hasn't looked at it. So just based on what we're hearing from members as the education department, like we talked about before, all the dozens and hundreds of calls that we get, but based on sitting in that task force meeting for the 2 days that we did, the members on that task force, and there's a couple IDs in the room that if you guys want to weigh in, we can't really give out the entire report and put everything out forward yet, but your direct experience serving on that task force would be very beneficial here. I know Trey and Kim and Maureen for sure. So the members were asking for more flexibility in there. They want to be able to get their certification and then have continuing options beyond that. They want to look at certificate type of programs. They want to look at having more ways, being more inclusive, having the opportunities to take different programs from different places. So that was pretty much the feedback that we got as a department coming out. But I would love if Kim or Maureen or Trey, if anybody wants to chime in and either echo those comments or completely disagree, that's 100% okay too.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep, absolutely.
Ashley, I'll say something
Yes.
that's probably not precisely on point. It's, but I can try to come back to the point, but I have a different point. I hope that the person whoever takes this job will have an adequate opportunity and be given time to learn how things work. I think there's a tendency to expect that someone's going to come in and launch their own great new programs and all that, and it may well be that the next person will do that, but I hope they'll be given time to figure out how things work before those kinds of expectations are imposed.
You're absolutely right, Trey. And I know we can attest to the director that we had before Dr. Long. Like Chris had mentioned, she didn't last the 90 days that we had. And there was a reason for that. This individual came in very heavy-handed, and before they had a chance to learn, really absorb and grasp the whole mass scale of the organization, she raised her hand and said, this is wrong, this is wrong, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be fixed. There's nothing in IINC that needs to be fixed. We're really looking at how do we enhance, how do we take things to another level? How do we continue to remain relevant? Not things are broken, they need to be fixed. So Chris, I know Mary dropped a question in the chat. You want to address that one?
Sure, thanks, Sue. And thanks, Mary. I'm off the top of my head, actually writing this down. The top 3 things that I see this individual doing in the next 3 to 5 years is, first and foremost, is to look at the future of clerk education and whether that is done, and that can only truly be done by having an individual go out and visit the institutes and visit the association conferences and talk to the members and find out exactly what particular topics that they think might be coming down the line that we should be looking at and working with the IDs in terms of developing things along that nature. Not telling the IDs what to develop, but giving them advice or comments in terms of that, pretty much what Joan was stating. Second, I mentioned outreach. I think it's real important that this individual can facilitate or teach. I think that was probably the best thing that Dr. Long did for us, is not only the dialogues, but she was able to attend a lot of institutes. She just had a very good facilitative nature regarding that. And I think it's important that the Director of Education has a face with the IDs. It's also great to have an IMC staffer be a speaker at an institute or an association conference. Ashley touched briefly on developing programs. I think that's also a collegial effort. And so that is one of those technical fundamental aspects of the position that we expect someone to come in and work with that. Looking at our certification programs, one of the things that we have heard over the years is how can we continue to have recertification without using that word that is not going to be heavy-handed and heavy-duty, not only on the members, but on the institutes. So there might be a way of someone coming in and saying, let's look at this so that you have a CMC, now you're going to the MMC level. Is there a way to raise the MMC program, which is something that the task force touched on regarding that. We also did a survey regarding that. So is there a way to develop something and then just make it so attractive that people want to get on board with it? Those would be the 3 main areas that we would look at. We certainly don't need anyone, as we've mentioned, to be heavy-handed. Certainly don't need anyone that's going to come in and do review applications and things of that nature. This is going to be more of a vision and someone who's continually looking to see where we can go in professional development and regarding our members. I hope that covers the majority of it.
Thanks, Chris. I know we also have our executive committee on the line today. I know we have President Mary Johnston incoming, our President-elect Sherry Pierce. I know Pamela Smith is on, and I apologize if I'm missing somebody in there. Oh, Miss Lana, I'm not sure if she's still on or if, yeah, she's still here. So if it's okay with the Institute directors, I would love for our executive committee to kind of give what Chris just gave, kind of an overview of what you see as a board member or as the executive committee moving into the future. Do any one of you four want to chime in, want to say anything on behalf of the executive committee, share your vision? You guys are going to be the ones also helping spearhead any kind of efforts in terms of where IIMC is going. Your role is incredibly important, along with all the rest of the region directors on the line. But that executive committee is going to be really responsible for helping us and staff direct where this organization is going. So, Madam President, Mary, would you like to chime in on anything and give us any idea of what you see in this position specifically?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
There we go.
Pretty much what Chris said, what he had just shared, you know, the being, you know, there's a fine line with the, you know, now we're doing more virtual, but, you know, eventually we're going to get back into in-person institutes and conferences. But we need to, you know, still have that fine line between the in-person and the virtual going down the road. Still very interested in the you know, beyond the MMC program and where that's going to take us. And I guess that's it.
Okay, so it sounds like continuing education, what we can do, yeah, to continue the education, move it forward. Okay,
Right.
thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Sherry, did you want to weigh in at all? Have any comments?
Oh, I had to find the unmute button as well. Well, for me, the most important thing is that this person understand the clerk profession. I mean, I've been around a long time, been on the board of directors twice, and been through a lot of education directors. I've seen the problems that we've experienced in the past, and so I think that we're going to look at avoiding that. But I think that person needs to, you know, have a high degree of educational background. I believe that they need to understand what the institute directors are, what their goals are. And I think that that person's out there. And the person also needs to work in-house with IIMC, with the staff on a day-to-day basis. I think that that's really important. So I think that we're gonna find that person, but and again, with the institute directors online here today, it's paramount to me that that person that we find, you know, works with you to make sure that you guys are reaching the goals that you want to reach with education. So I'm confident we'll find that person, and we have learned from the past, and I think that we'll keep that in mind.
Thank you, Sherry. Appreciate the feedback. Appreciate you speaking up. I know we have Pamela Smith. Pamela, if you're on the line and you can hear us, if you want to add in, we would love to hear what you have to say as Vice President.
I really think that I agree with what Sherry and Mary both said, as well as what Chris said. I think it's imperative that we get a professional person, but somebody that understands what clerking is and what governmental education is as far as what our roles are in the world of government, not only for municipalities, but for counties. And it may be very possible that we look at professional periodicals in education to hone in exactly what person we eventually find. I believe it's important that we look at the previous directors to see what their strengths were and what their weaknesses were, what we are looking for, and try to find an even keel of what we need without finding fault of anybody who has come before them, but somebody that is willing to not only work with the IDs, but with staff and with the board and executive committee, understanding that we believe that the most important thing that we can provide our members is the best education that they can get, no matter what that is, because it appears to me that we need to have an educational opportunity that not only provides in person and friendship, but provides the ability to do virtual in office, because we're big, small, medium, and large, and not all of us have the same opportunity. So I think we have an opportunity, and I think that we can rise to the challenge, and I know that each of us are willing to get the best person that we possibly can. It just might take longer than we want. And I appreciate you letting me talk.
Absolutely. Thank you for speaking up. Ms. Lana, you want to take a few moments and give us your feedback?
I will agree with what has been said before, but I also would like to reiterate what Trey has said about allowing that person to have some time to come in and learn, to work with Chris, work with the education department and the education committee, but more importantly, to have a face-to-face Zoom meeting or whatever media type is workable with the institute directors, because every state, no matter what it is, what we're looking at, the IDs, the laws are different. What I have in Kansas, I don't do elections. Many of the states do. So that person who comes in to take our director of professional development needs to really have a one-on-one with our institute directors and be given time to absorb, process, and then start to plan what is important to the clerks and, more importantly, to the institute directors and how to establish the programs. I think the virtual training is great, and I commend the education department for coming up to bat when we're in a whole new scenario of dealing with this type of situation, and the diversity and being able to do that. Like one of the girls said in Region 8, they don't want to come to the big bad city, and that's kind of the way it is in Kansas as well. The people in western Kansas and even down in southeastern Kansas don't have a lot of the access that we have when you're closer to a larger city. And I think it's important that we are diverse enough to give that to them. But it all boils down to finding that right person. And it's going to take some time. And like Sherry and Mary, I've been around IIMC now for 22 years, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly sometimes in some of the education directors that we've had. So I think it's going to take time, and it's critical that that person meets with the IDs and understands their perspective, but it's also important that everyone realize that the board also is going to have some throw in this discussion. And as Ashley said, whatever the task force has come up with, the board has not even seen that information yet. So it'll be interesting to see all the different perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Lana. Well, what I would like to do, because it sounds like we still have, we want to move continuing education forward. We want to make sure that it's still relevant. That seems to be the theme that's coming through, and we need somebody to help us do that as we move through. So what I would like to do is go back and take a look at these questions again. And I would like to break you up into groups just for a few moments, just to get a smaller breakout group option here, and see if we can't address at least the main two questions here. So what collective goals do we have? Even if that's just in your group, what are we all working towards together over the next 5, 10, 15 years? And then bring back, what is it that you're not receiving from IIMC, whether it's support, resources, enough collaboration, anything like that. Bring us back something that you're missing or something that you wish there was more of. Give us something that we can work with, and then we'll be able to discuss as a group on how we can find an individual to bring that gap. But let's narrow it down from what are we missing to now what kind of person do we need to find to help bridge that gap. So I'm gonna give you a second just to jot these questions down or take a photo of them if you want to. And then I will work on breaking you into groups. That way you guys can chat amongst yourselves. And I'll give you maybe just 10, 15 minutes. So real quick, I want you to go through first thoughts, first things that come to your head. Try not to dominate the conversation too much, any one individual. Give everyone a chance to speak. And then I'll give you a minute warning when it's time to come back, okay? So we got the questions. I'm gonna go ahead and break you up. Let's noise. And we'll wait just a few more moments or so for every last minute stragglers. Okay, so we hope that was helpful. We hope connecting on a little bit of a smaller scale, getting more of a chance to chat was beneficial, and that you were able to come back with a takeaway. We had 4 rooms that we were broken up into. So I would love for a representative of each of those rooms to go ahead and chime in and tell us what the one thing that you're missing or that you're feeling you're not getting enough of, the one thing that's lacking that IIMC can look for in this individual to be able to move forward. So what is it that you're not getting? Somebody raise your hand or unmute and let me know. Raising your hand would be preferred, just so we don't chime in all at once. Is there anybody that wants to be the spokesperson? No hands? Or maybe there's a, what is the collaborative goal? Either way, I know there was a lot of good conversation in there because it took a long time for you to accept your join back button. So we know you were talking. Anybody? Amy Brewer, go ahead.
Okay, well, I don't know why, but I was nominated as our spokesperson.
Okay.
So I'll try to do an okay job. We had a lot of conversation about the virtual programs that are more general in nature, and then state-specific programs. And the discussion was pretty much how important it is for each state to, that's so different, that laws in California regarding elections are so different from Florida. So while we all agree that virtual training has its place, we really, really think, and I agree with this, that IIMC is really good for doing the general overbroad higher level stuff like at the conference, but we still need help with our state specific programming. And if my colleagues, if I get this wrong, feel free to jump in. Regarding the new professional development director, we talked about skills versus knowledge. And I know that a lot of people think that the director might need a PhD or in public administration or adult learning or something like that. But I think we all agreed that the soft skills, the ability to reach out, collaboration, is so much more important than the specific knowledge. With that said, we felt like it was really important for that person to understand municipal government, but that soft skills were a little bit more of a leading edge where they could learn the knowledge if we chose somebody based on the more important ability to bring people together and work with the diverse population, the diverse states and institute directors. So I think that's a pretty decent summary. And again, my colleagues, feel free to correct me if I misspoke. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. So I'm going to just try to recap. And the thing that we were missing in terms of what you're not getting from IIMC is the help in developing the state-specific content. It seems like the state-specific versus the generic or general content is kind of the basis of the beginning of that conversation. So I'm trying to figure out where the thing that you're missing was. So maybe give me just a couple more sentences, a couple more seconds about what it is that you feel that you're not currently getting from IIMC that this person would be able to help us with. Or was there a takeaway?
No, I don't think we were asking for IIMC's help with state-specific programming, but just the support and acknowledgement that we all do need to offer the different things.
Okay, got it.
Different sessions.
Got it, understood. Thank you, Amy, I appreciate it.
I don't think we said we were missing anything from IIMC. Right now, although we don't necessarily need help with virtual training, although some states do, but not every state needs
that. Okay, thank you, Amy, I appreciate it.
Ashley?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead, Ellen.
I just think that one of the things that came up was that when it comes to the state specific stuff, it's knowing who's in that community that can be able to be used to present, or if it's non-specific stuff, this person can be used as a resource. So if this individual is out traveling around and they go to Kansas and they see this amazing speaker, then you can kind of put together a pool of speakers, like a speakers bureau, and say, oh, I can call you and say, oh, I need somebody to come in and speak to me about budgets for municipalities. I really don't have anybody here in Nebraska, but you've been to Kansas and you see somebody that can put it in general terms, that's a great presenter. That's the help that we discussed during that time, and having so that you would know what's going on, or that other speakers that we could be pulled in, and so developing like a speakers bureau. Am I getting that correct, ladies, that were in my group?
Yes, thank you.
I see heads nodding.
Yes, yeah, that's where we were going.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you for that. That's the kind of stuff we're looking for from today. Those are the kinds of things that when we're looking at the job description and the skills needed and the outreach, that's the kind of thing that we're looking at to say, okay, here's what they're actually going to do. Now let's work backwards. What do they need in order to be able to develop that, to be able to give you that? So we really genuinely right now want to know what you feel like you're lacking. So what else? We got a speakers bureau. Ashley Kent, go ahead.
Different breakout group, but ours, what we talked about, started off with the beyond the MMC and multiple MMC levels, and kind of the difference in what that looks like, and just the idea of supporting the continuing education, not necessarily for the clerks to understand the value, but for the councils to understand the value, because some of the clerks face the issue of once they're certified, their council no longer supports them going to institute. So somebody that understands the value of that has a history and a background in local government, so they understand what it actually means, versus maybe an academic practitioner who is really focused on the academic curriculum type of development. We're more interested in the practical development of that. And the one thing that we spent a lot of time on was just the ability, and sounds like other groups did too, to build the relationships with the institute directors, that soft skill background that would be super helpful. And we're looking at someone who could kind of assess the trends, the future trends, and make sure that the organization as a whole is moving forward, so we don't end up stagnant or behind the times and not relevant. We want this to be very impactful, very useful, very relevant for the clerks that are choosing to be members. And one thing that I think that we didn't get to talk about, but I think goes along the lines of what Ellen was saying, is maybe somebody who can say, hey, there's these different topics or different sessions happening in different areas, different states, that might work really well with yours. I can see that you guys haven't touched very much on this area, and there's already a session curriculum developed for that. Let's collaborate, let's connect people. So somebody who can be that conduit would be really nice. Ladies, did I miss anything?
Great job,
Okay.
Ashley. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, those are great. And so it sounds like we're looking kind of a database that we can have speakers, somebody that can be watching to see what the individual institutes are running, what you're lacking, looking at what's going really well, what's popular, what's trending. How can we make sure that everybody knows that and shares who's available to do it, topics that can be shared, content that can be not the wheel recreated, but how can we kind of work together to ensure that all that stuff is being received. I love it. What else? Anybody else? I know I think I've heard from 2 groups, right? So 2 more. Kim, go ahead.
Our group, when it came to the question of collective goals, it wasn't, there weren't any new goals, but we talked about, like we're in a good place right now, especially compared to some times in the past. We're in a really good place where we are trusted as institute directors by IIMC to do the best, thing for our clerks and to be offering high quality education and all the good things, which hasn't necessarily been the case in the past. So we were like, a goal would be to maintain that, please. And so I think that kind of, got discussed earlier too. As far as what we were missing, we didn't really come up with too much. Again, it was sort of like, let's keep up the personal relationship, and yeah, keep up that sort of one-on-one relationship between the institute director and the professional development director. Let's see, Trey did mention that the person should be able to clearly explain what the relationship should be between IIMC and the institutes. Which again, I mean, we didn't talk about this in the group, and my personal little take on it is that in the past, there have been times when it felt fuzzy. Like I, as an institute director, thought that the education director should be doing X, Y, Z, and other institute directors had their own take on it. And then that person, like, it was just a whole lot of different. And so, yeah, my hope would be that, the expectations and the job description would be just crystal clear and shared with, we would all just know and be able to talk on the same level about it that way going forward. So that's all.
Thank you, Kim. I think that's fantastic. And I love the word fuzzy because when I looked through your data on what everyone was looking for, that was my initial reaction. It took me a few days longer than I feel like it should have. It took me a few days longer than I did looking through your online data. When I looked at your online, it was crystal clear where everyone was at, what they were struggling with, what we were seeing. And when we looked at this position, looked at it and went, okay, where are we going? What are we doing? I don't know what to make of it. And I think that's part of the problem that we've had with other directors too, is that you come in looking under the expectation of being a director, meaning that heavy hand, that oversight. So we're setting this individual up for failure, even with a title by itself. Yes, they're the director of education. We even tried, Chris and I, going a different route, saying director of professional development, because it brought along a different type of individual, not just that K-12 academic, but now we're working professional development. So our goal here is to make this as crystal clear so everybody knows what this individual is responsible for. They know exactly how they're going to be interacting with you, how they're going to be supporting you, how they're going to be supporting us as staff. So definitely love that word fuzzy. We need to be crystal clear. And that's the whole point of this conversation and asking you that question. What are you missing? So we can figure out how do we work backwards to fill that gap. So I know one more group that I think we haven't heard of. We have about 15 minutes left. So chime in now. And then I know that I have a couple of comments in the chat that we'll address too. So who's my last group? Who's my last representative? Anybody?
I'll do it. This is
Thank
Peggy.
you, Peggy.
I'll do it. Our group we talked to some of the similar as what others had talked about. We wanted someone who can help us move forward, be it with moving virtually or moving into actually different learning modalities. Not virtual is not necessarily their best thing for everyone, and to help identify new trends. But one of the concerns that was what we had was we don't want them to then come in and say, okay, we see this as a new trend, you have to teach it. Because all of us decided that our clerks are the ones who help us determine what sessions we need to offer each year. And we offer based on what their needs are. And sometimes the needs within our state are going to be completely different than the trends because of what we have going on within our state. And we want to make sure that the new director comes in and realizes that we're all different. And you can't just come up with one way of doing this training and expect all 50 institutes or however many we have to do it that way. And that just as, that the guidelines are guidelines for us to follow, but there are times that we'll do something, that's slightly different than the guideline, but so long as they're usually general enough that we can make what we need to have in our area work. So, because I know like as a rule, movies are not necessarily something that you would allow, but in the state of Illinois, a movie was made about a clerk or a treasurer who had, embezzled $52 million. We were allowed to show that movie and discuss it because it was very pertinent to our state. So things like that happen all the time, and we want the new directors to be aware of that.
Yep, absolutely. And in the chat, just to reiterate, I know we had said the Director of Professional Development, just to clarify that Dr. Long's position was the Director of Professional Development for 5 years. So that's been the title that we transitioned to in 2014-15 when we brought her on board. And that is the title that we're currently looking for. So it's nice to see that everyone has that, or at least that there's that feedback in there that it's a good title. When we originally sent out resumes, or when we originally requested resumes in 2014, we started to get kindergarten teachers. We got K through 12 teachers. We got a lot of educators that had no direct experience with who our group was. So that's where that title came back from. Chris and I went back to the drawing board and said, okay, we're getting the wrong group. We're using the wrong words. And maybe that's been the issue in the past, is that education, yes, is different than professional development. They are one and the same, but they're also very, very different. So we got a much better round of applicants, much more along the line of what we were looking for when we made that switch. So that's something too, that now if we need to look at the wording, just like we're doing with the guidelines, just like we're doing with everything else that happens in our organizations, if we look at them with fresh eyes, maybe we see something that we didn't see before. Let me see, Morgan has a question. Can IMC share the timeline for hiring this position, and if they will allow IDs, or if IDs will be allowed to observe or participate in the official process? Morgan, I'm gonna let Chris answer that one. I think he's still on the line. So Chris, if you wanna chime in on what process was, go for it.
Thanks, Morgan. It's a few things right now. First and foremost, we'll be working with the executive committee on a recruitment process. 2, we'll have to be looking at the 2021 budget and taking a look in and seeing where we are with that. The position is originally slotted for 2021 before we hit the pandemic and things of that nature. So I just sent a brief report to our budget committee. I mean, that report will go out Monday, telling them where we are today and what the future might look like. So there's some things there, and be more than happy to share any leads, process, anything like that with any of the institute directors that want to participate in that. It won't be a decision-making process, but it will be a collaborative process in terms of yes and no, in terms of what we're looking for. Are we heading down the right road, wrong road, that type of thing. So happy to collaborate in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I know I have Pamela Miller, who doesn't have the option to raise her hand on the telephone, but Pamela, go ahead and unmute yourself and let's hear from you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I apologize. I had to leave the call for about 15 minutes around the 11 o'clock hour, and this might have been discussed already. So please forgive me if this is duplicative. But, you know, you've asked for honest, difficult conversation, and we discussed this briefly in our small breakout room. I heard a lot of people say one of the things they really wanted for the new person was the time and the opportunity to really get to know the institutes, the institute directors, the board, the processes, that kind of thing. And I too have been around for a while, I think through at least 4 professional development, education directors, whatever you want to call them. And as it's already been pointed out, it's not a very good history. It's a somewhat disastrous history of that particular position. So I think it's very important. So whoever comes in, that position has a lot of baggage. And so I think it's really important that they be given the space to understand that baggage, the time to understand that baggage, and the very complicated relationships that exist between that position and the board, that position in IIMC, that position in the institute directors, the institute director's relationship with IIMC. It's all of it is very, very complicated, and all those relationships have a lot of baggage. And in order for this person to really be successful, and for all of us to be able to continue the strong relationships that we seem to be successfully building at this point in time, and to not backpedal on those, I think some patience, some compassion, and some really honest communication from all of us would benefit all of us greatly, particularly that person, because we all want to see that person be successful, because if they're not, it hurts all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Appreciate the feedback, appreciate the response. Lana, did you want to unmute? I know you had a comment or a question.
Thank you. One comment that hasn't been brought up, and I know it's, to me, it's very relevant. We have an international group. We are International Institute, and I know that the international side of that is over 5,000 members of us. And having attended 2 of their conferences and talking to them about what we as an organization could do better, one of the things was that came up several times in discussions that I had was to up the programming for our International Institute. And I don't know, my international person on here might want to jump on, Sarah, but we need to always think of them as well, and their institute directors, and who I had the pleasure of meeting one when I was there, but make sure that they're involved in some way. This is their institute and their organization as well. And I know that we don't work as closely with them maybe as we do here in the States, but that's one element that I've always been very fascinated with and appreciative of. And I think we need to reach across to them on what's happening in their part of the world, because sometimes things happen there much faster than they do in the States. And so I think we need, going forward, we need to cross the ocean and talk to our international members on what their thoughts are that we could do better as an organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Lana. So we're getting close to that time. To be respectful of everybody's time, I'll go ahead and wrap up, unless there's any burning questions or burning statements that need to be made. But I would like to send you home with some homework, if it's okay. If you want to participate, obviously not mandatory, but this would help us out a lot. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Let me pull up my slideshow here. So we talked about what our goals are, what we're not getting, how can this individual bridge that gap, and we're starting to get that idea. But now that we kind of have a better idea of the direction we're going, oops, my fault. Give me 1 second to move this window. There we go. I really want us to take a look at breaking this down real specific. So who are we looking for? Now that we know, who do you need, who does your institute need, and who do our members need? So I'd like to invite you to just an opportunity. Let's create an avatar of our ideal institute, professional development, collaborator, whatever we want to call this individual, director of professional development. But I invite you to give us a couple of paragraphs, and this can be as simple as emailing it to me directly. Not a problem. I don't mind taking those. I would love to actually receive them. And let us know who you want, who do you need, what types of things does this individual bring to the table. So get really creative, get really specific, create a person, give them a name, what do they like to do, what are they passionate about, what did they study, what do they do in terms of communication, do they text you, do they call you, do they meet with you via Zoom once a week, once a month? What is this person doing to help support you? So I know when we look at it originally, it's a big picture and it seems like a hokey exercise, but realistically, if we don't know who we're looking for and what this person is going to be doing, we're not going to be able to find that right individual if we don't know what right is. So I really want to know what your ideal partner is. How do they talk to you? How do you meet? How do they support you? What resources do they specifically provide to you? Not so much to the institute directors as a whole. I want to know you now on a personal level. So we've talked about this collaborative effort. We've talked about the group as a whole. Now let's break it down. Your specific institute, your specific role. What do we want? Who's going to help? Who can bring information to the table, resources to the table, ideas to the table to help take us where we've established that we want to go? We want to continue to maintain the partnership we have. We want to continue to maintain the high level of expectations that our members have for us, the high level of education we're delivering. We want to be able to pivot when we need to pivot, and we want to have the resources as a group to do so. So I invite you, send me an email with this information. Doesn't have to be long, just let it be specific, you as an individual. So just a thought, just an opportunity. Again, I have Angie Johnson on the phone. Angie, the time you laid out for Monday was perfect. We'll go ahead and run with that. I'll send you an email. But Angie and I are going to collaborate next week. She chairs the Education and Professional Development Committee, and she and I are going to talk about taking the questions that we asked you in terms of the Director of Professional Development. And we're going to add a couple in there on member perspective. What do our members, what does the committee want from this individual? What do they feel IIMC isn't giving? What can we do better? What are we lacking? Where can we go from here from the committee member perspective? So really looking forward to that conversation. We will share that feedback with you once we have it. We're going to ask for written feedback or form feedback similar to what you did. That way we have it. So at this time, though, I completely invite you to speak up, ask any last minute burning questions, make any statements. If you haven't had a chance to specifically speak your opinion on this position, you are welcome to do so. I know that it is not always easy to do it in person or online. So if you'd rather email or take us offline, that's okay too. You're welcome to continue that conversation. I see Maureen's hand going up and down. Burning question, burning statement.
Yeah, I still can't find the hand thing. So I looked at the survey, and I'm sorry, I guess I didn't answer early enough to be part of it. I sent you my information. One of the questions was about the number of hours per year and how many people had delivered this year. And some of the answers were very confusing to me. So I was wondering if there was a way you could digest that to us, and I would also like to be included, because that is information I really would like to be able to bring back to our state so they can understand what the norm is and what other states are being offered.
Okay, well let me get a little bit of clarification. Which parts were confusing? Was it just how many hours people are offering, and because of the variance in how many hours?
It wasn't confusing the variance. What was confusing is some of the answers didn't translate into how many hours they were offering that year. You know, I want to know how many hours a year you offer in CMC and MMC.
Okay,
and some
let's
of the
pull up the
answers
sheets.
were confusing to me.
Yeah, let's take a look at it. Let's go screen share here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the spreadsheet. Let me shrink down my gallery, my photos of all of you here so I can get here. Okay, so this is the two columns that we're looking at here. How many in-person hours are you traditionally offering each year? So going through, We're looking at 42 hours. The NAs may be not institute directors. So on the left-hand side, the orange ones, I did mention it in the beginning on the first call, but not this one. Orange are institute directors with what we have here. So you're getting 55 CMC hours here, 55 MMC, 120 for Clerks Institute. Some of our institute directors are offering a full 120 hours. I know Trey is one. I believe they actually do 130 plus hours. That's just institute. So definitely varies. I know going from how many have you gone to in-person to how many have you taken online, some of the feedback is very difficult to translate. And that's part of the reason we said the word fuzzy earlier. When Kim said that, it rang a bell because I looked at this too and got very, very fuzzy. The thing I can tell you is that our institutes are all set up incredibly different. North Carolina, you can get certified in a 10-month time period. Maureen, it's 15-month period in terms of fulfilling the educational component for certification, not all the way. So most of our institutes, though, are working on a 3-year cycle. So they're offering 40 hours per year, once per year for 3 years. So that's the traditional model, the one that's most consistent throughout what we see traditionally. International's totally different. International institutes require hundreds of hours. We're not talking 120. We're talking 300, 400, 500 hours to complete their programs. So very, very different. In terms of the number of hours, let's go down a little bit. We see 36. Some of our institutes are on a 4-year cycle. I know Kansas, Morgan, and if you want to chime in, you're welcome to. Kansas is on a 4-year cycle. So they go once per year in the fall. They have a spring conference that participates as well, but once per year for 4 years. So everybody's very different in terms of how they do it. 316 total hours. Let's figure out what state that is. Ooh, that's Cassie. No surprise there. 158 MMC hours though. So really, really different. I don't know if that helps, Maureen. I don't know if that clarifies. Just everybody's on a different annual cycle. You are one of the fastest ones. You and North Carolina are probably the 2 fastest in terms of all 120 hours.
And I guess that was it, 158. I mean, that seemed extraordinary. Is that every year?
Cassie, is that every year?
Mine, everything that I offer, I certify through you guys. So if I run a presidential academy, all those hours are part of that. So I really do run that many hours in a year. So,
but you didn't separate it out with CMC and MMC Academy.
Pretty much almost everything I do, well, is CMC. All those hours can be used for CMC, but it didn't really ask for that question. So I didn't do that. I didn't.
All right. That explains the answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we were adding our CMC and MMC Academy, we'd have a different answer too. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it didn't say that to me. So either that or I misinterpreted it.
It's like comparing an apple to an orange, it seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. We got to remember, like the conversation that we've had all day and over both parts, everybody is incredibly different. There is no mold, there is no box that we can shove everybody into. Even if we tried, it just doesn't work. And then you add the international aspect of it into it, and it's even farther from being connected. So we all do the same thing, just very, very different ways, different cycles, different models. And that's something to wrap up the professional development director position. That's something that they have to be very, very mindful of, whoever comes into this position, and have that first and foremost in the front of their mind. Not going to be able to absorb guidelines, not going to be able to absorb conferences, associations, all the different branches of IIMC, if you don't understand that not everybody does everything exactly the same. There is no one size fits all model. We all know that. We need to make sure that whoever comes on board has that first thing in their mind. There is no one size fits all. We cannot put a blanket on everybody and say follow and go for it. So what other questions, comments for the good of the order? Anything we haven't addressed? I really hope you take advantage of that avatar opportunity. I really want to know you as an individual. And if you just want to have a conversation about it, we can talk about it too if you don't want to write it down. But writing it down will allow us to really look at what are the consistencies in there. That'll help us take that job description and really write it based on what it is that you feel that you need, what kind of person, what type of individual you're looking for. So thank you so much. We are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, I appreciate the conversations. I appreciate the transparency, the honesty, the difficult conversations. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for showing up. And as always, thank you for what you do. If there's anything that we as IINC can do to support you as you go through the next weeks, months, year, please let us know. Don't hesitate. It is always our honor and always our pleasure to work with you. Thank you so much, you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend, and we will see you soon. If anybody wants to stay around and chat, we'll hang on the line for a couple more minutes.